Good evening. You're either watching or listening to Redwood Wonk. My name is Eric Kirk. I'm with David Frank. We are talking national political news of the day, and there is so much to talk about. But we're going to have to narrow it down to a few topics, and one of the topics is the change of missile policy. Biden has all of a sudden changed the policy to allow Ukraine to use the long-range rockets. Probably should call them missiles because they are guided and very accurate. The HIMARS, as they're called, I think what is it, highly mobile, let me find it, high mobility artillery rocket system. And they have actually been a pretty important factor in helping Ukraine fight the invasion. But the rule has been that you can have these weapons, but do not send them into Russia. We don't want to start World War III. All of a sudden, our tactical missile system, right? It's all of a sudden, Biden changed this, and we're going to discuss why. There have been several theories advanced, but there is also a 71 billion aid package that is going out, one of the largest, that's going to include a lot of ammunition and stuff, but a bunch of these missiles and a bunch of the javelins, which have been very effective in fighting the Russian tanks since the very first day of the war. So the question is whether or not this will could lead to World War III, because Putin is very angry about it. And the analysis I keep reading goes like this. He's not going to pull anything because he's got an asset coming into office in a few weeks. And what Biden is hoping to do is, because Trump is probably going to really try to pressure Zelensky into some concessions, that he wants Zelensky to have as much of negotiating from as much of a position of strength as possible. And so these missiles, which could be used to defend the forces that Ukraine already has in Kursk, a part of Russia, but also to go into supply depots in Russia near the border or behind Donetsk. And Russians are probably frantically trying to move their supplies back out of range. But the range of some of these missiles, they can be anywhere from 200 miles to 500 miles, and they are accurate to a T, one of the most accurate weapons that they have, and again, can make a big difference. So the question is, and we don't know what else Biden is going to do, but he's definitely been talking with European leaders over the past 6 months to set up so that that Zelensky wouldn't have to surrender, at least for a year in. Other European powers are picking up. France, for instance, is actually sending some pretty high tech weaponry and other countries are as well. So, Dave, I mean, is this an escalation? Or you think Putin will wait for Trump to get into office before he does anything rash? Or will he do anything rash? He has to know that he would not survive a nuclear war. He would be dead, definitely, him personally. He would not. How many other people could he do? It's definitely not in his interest to start one. So the question is whether or not he's been pushed so hard and emasculated so much that he's kind of forced to basically self-destruct. I'm not sure that Putin is into self-destruction. And so, Dave, what do you have to say?
Yeah, thank you for that setup as always. I think this is, we are talking not just about war and peace here, but we're actually talking about the ultimate war. You used nuclear weapons. And so in that sense, this is obviously the stakes are as high as they could be. It's called mutually assured destruction for a reason. If a nuclear weapon is hypothetically, if a nuclear weapon is used, everyone loses. So that's been the ongoing, not just the doctrine. It's been the doctrine of the world. So in a sense, that's been the prevailing bottom line about these discussions. So, assuming a rational actor, the question is what's at play here. So, I think hearing the rhetoric from Putin about he is now sort of saber rattling and threatening the use of nuclear weaponry, its purpose is fear. And that's how authoritarian leaders work, right? Like one of the key sources of their power is how they get inside people's heads and make them fear them, right? So what actually happened here? We all know by now that there's a part, the southeastern region, Donbass region of Ukraine is occupied, and 1,000 days in, 3 years in, Ukraine has had very little success moving the line. So traditional battle tactics, it's effectively a stalemate. People talk about an off lane for Putin as a way for him to say, for example, step back from the brink of an escalation between Russia and NATO. He's expressed zero signals that he is going to blink. So what happened then? Yes, Ukraine's has some successes to speak of about, for example, against the Navy. In the Crimea, Russian navies had to retreat away from Crimea because of the success of some attacks. But basically, Russia's vastly superior in many, many, many ways militarily. Manpower, willingness to endure death of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of their own troops already, depending on the source. So head to head, it's been a stalemate, but with no end in sight. In part because the West doesn't want to capitulate either. So what happened? Ukraine went and invaded the Kursk region. That's the northeastern part of the border, and there's actually Ukrainian troops there, like in Russia, occupying a piece of Russia, closer to Moscow. So occupying that territory, and actually that's where these weapons were used, right? So the U.S. The ATACMS that you described, the missile system. They're very similar to other tactical weapons that Ukraine's already used from England. Germany won't let them use these, give them permission to use to target inside Russia. So in a sense, it's really about the negotiation with Trump here to cut to the chase. With Trump coming into office, and Trump basically saying, "I'll end this war." There will be a negotiation. He's basically the ultra realist. To a certain extent, from the Western perspective, he's going to be abandoning the principle of you should not reward aggression, territorial ambition. I not to overstate the case. These Army tactical missiles, they are probably going to be very effective at cutting off Russian supply lines, targeting Russian weapons depots, energy depots, logistics chains, the actual transportation of resupply. So it's a very effective weapon. And I think that's why Putin's willing to just say, be careful, I'll go Texas Hold'em style all in. Will he actually do that? The chances are near zero, to be honest. That's my take on it. And not that I'm just using that based on the 500
Nobody's
places.
taking him seriously on that.
Right. All the things we've looked at. So I'll hand to you in one more sec, but I'll just say this. Trump probably, I've said this before on this show. I think that, it's going to be unfortunate for Ukraine, what ends up happening in terms of the peace process, but that's what people in our country appear to have voted for. And so these weapons, long story short, these weapons are a way to give Ukraine the maximum possible negotiating power, some success on Russian territory, some actual, harm, some legitimate harm to Russian capability, capacity, and that therefore it gives, again, it gives a credible exit ramp, off ramp for Putin to get most of what he wants, but maybe capitulate. In other words, Ukraine can withdraw from Russia. It's something that Ukraine could give back to Russia in exchange for peace.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is the Democrats are gearing up for trying to take the narrative on this. And what they are framing so far is that any settlement agreement, peace agreement that involves Ukraine surrendering land to Russia is a surrender on the level of the Anschluss, which was, of course, when the West stood back when Germany annexed Austria at the very beginning of World War II. And so they're going to frame it as that. They're going to frame it in terms of if he is if he is given this, he will simply consolidate, Putin that is, he will simply consolidate his power and then move to take the rest of Ukraine once he no longer has the quote unquote tool in the White House. And so then he'll be threatening Poland or the Baltic states and basically saying that this is World War II all over again, comparing what will happen with Poland to what happened with Czechoslovakia in the sellout at Prague when Western leaders went in and actually negotiated that Germany would get to have Czechoslovakia. And so it won't stop there. Now, Poland is a NATO country, so that would be a different situation, assuming that we still have the NATO treaty. But one of the things that Trump did last time was it seemed like he was trying to basically bring NATO down. And of course, it was under the guise of we want to have other countries paying more, a higher percentage of their GDP towards their own defense, blah, blah, blah. And it's been kind of happening anyway because they've been stepping up production. And you're right, I used the wrong term. HIMARS is just rockets. The ATACMS, as they call it, are the really precise missiles. And I forget where I was going with that, but they were, they aren't going to turn the war around, but they will make it hard for Russia to advance, particularly in the winter. So the range they have, but also possibly to protect their position in Kursk, as we mentioned before. So the question is, well, what is Biden's game, and what is he trying to do here? Yes, he wants Ukraine to survive longer, but why this change in policy, and why now?
I think that Biden was trying to, the White House, the West, the United States, NATO writ large, primary responsibility, ultimately is to the global order, the order by which post World War II United Nations structure, NATO alliance, preventing Russian tanks from just rolling back into Europe someday. Like ultimately, that's the big picture. So NATO has been expanding into over the like say last 10 years or so, into the Baltic states, now into the Scandinavian countries. Since this happened, since let's go back a little bit, right? Since the Trump administration, NATO really has been doing what you said. It has been, countries have been more responsible for investing in their future. They are more responsible for a higher percentage of GDP investments in defense. So to a certain extent, Trump can claim some success for initiating that, or at least highlighting some imbalance in the relationship. But now we're at the point where, like, I've watched God knows how many of these videos already. Massive investments are being made to facilitate approximately, the mobilization on demand of like 800,000 NATO troops to the border with Russia. They have plans in place. Poland is a huge center. I think there's like 5 divisions right now in Poland. Finland's got the longest border. I know we have limited time left here, but the idea is that this is the long game. So what was Biden thinking? Biden was thinking, I believe, making the maximum possible improvements to Ukraine's strength, position on the battlefield, position in negotiations, but also, like, for example, they also forgave, or they're talking about forgiving, $5 billion or so, a little less in debt. So some of these weapon systems some of these investments are grants, some of them are loans. So it's all about kind of incrementalism. They've been fighting with one hand tied behind their back. The fighter jets are slow rolled so that there wasn't too much of an offense to Russia, so that it didn't escalate too much for an imbalance, for instability leading up to the election. Now that the election is passed, now I think that they're willing to take more risks. And then finally, ultimately, there's going to be, truthfully, there's going to be some reckoning that happens, unfortunately, because Trump has signaled that that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, but I think it also, I wouldn't, put it past Biden that he is making it difficult for Trump, because Trump it has to make a choice. Do we reverse this policy, right? And say and call Ukraine back? You can't use those in Russian territory. Well, that can have political consequences because the Republicans actually support this policy, most of them, right?
Yeah.
So right out of the gate, he's running into problems with his own party. And this is one where national security and these issues are ones where the Republicans tend to break from him on. And so it makes it hard. Trump can't just come in and say, okay, stop that. I think he's going to make it, they will make it real hard. The other thing that Biden has done is made it easier for Lockheed, who basically produces these weapons, to deal with European countries. And this is something that Trump also has to think twice about reversing. He's basically setting things up to maybe box Trump in. Okay, so probably the most controversial of Trump's. So he hasn't officially nominated anybody. He can't do it until he's actually president, right? But this is what the people that he's saying he's going to nominate, and there's some real controversial ones in there. I will point out that all but one or two of them, for somebody who wants to drain the swamp, are all Washington insiders or corporate oligarchs. So far I've not seen any sign of draining the swamp. I think they're just about all white. But he said that doesn't matter. He got elected on the platform of that doesn't matter. So he should be fine for that. But Matt Gaetz is the one to be Attorney General is got to be one of the ironies that there, and it might be that that Trump intended this to be some sort of FU because Matt Gaetz has been investigated by the DOJ but not prosecuted by the DOJ. And part of the reason he hasn't been prosecuted is we're learning now is that there are ambiguities as to whether or not he knew that this girl was 17 years old when he had sex with her. But the story broke today that apparently he gave two women witnesses $10,000 and a bunch of different payments. I'm assuming it's the 17-year-old and the friend who allegedly saw some of the sexual activity. This testimony has been made in private in the ethics committee, and of course Johnson and the Republicans are frantically trying to keep it shut down, but stuff is getting leaked. The attorneys for the women are letting stuff out. And Republicans are privately telling Trump, this isn't going anywhere. We're not going to vote for him. We're not going to go down with the ship here. And so the Senate may not confirm him. But it is still a really confusing choice on that part, on his part to do this. And I mean, the comedians, I'm sure the late night comedians have been having a field day with it and will continue to. But it's sort of like, what do you even do for satire? It's so bizarre, a choice. I don't know. Maybe he wants everybody to focus on that choice, so they don't focus on some other bizarre choices that aren't as bizarre. But what do you make of this, Dave?
It's pretty wild. Again, as always, thank you for that setup. I think that this is just there's two layers of this onion that I'd like to address. Firstly, loyalty above all else. So if you didn't actually look at Matt Gaetz himself, his exact situation, you could just say he's someone that Trump can control and someone who would do basically anything that he asked. This is so far out of his wheelhouse. Matt Gaetz's experience, his skill set, his capacity. It's just not. It's not ideal, right?
Oh,
I've heard people say it's one of the most absurd nominations in the history of cabinets.
it's got to
For
be.
Yeah, so it's so once you think, okay, it's about loyalty, it's knowingly absurd. Once you get past that layer, now we're like at is this even remotely possible? And I think they have floated that he would use recess appointments as a way to try to use power and avoid accountability. So over the coming months, you and I are going to learn a lot more about recess appointments, I'm sure. But let's just get past that. Let's suspend our disbelief that like Trump isn't just going to railroad it through, that it's actually going to be considered like a standard nomination for attorney general. So with that in mind, now let's talk about the merits. He's been accused by the Justice Department, federal investigators. They said that they have identified a trail of payments that have gone to women that have testified that he made those payments for sex, including a potential underage person, and that those charges were dropped. Those charges were not carried out. So that gives Matt Gaetz and Donald Trump the lane to say this was all fraud or they lied. Like he's saying that, right? So in fact, today, as we speak, earlier today, a new development that Vice President-elect J.D. Vance and Matt Gaetz, they went on a charm offensive in the Senate. And I think it was the Rayburn Room, which is adjacent to the chambers. And they just had a revolving door of senators come in. And, basically Matt Gaetz got to make his pitch. J.D. Vance said, that Donald Trump deserves a cabinet that's loyal. And so just give Matt Gaetz a hearing. And so everyone's like, okay, thank you for meeting with us, right? Senator Lee, a Republican from Utah, said, we didn't get a lot of details. There's a quote, we didn't get a lot of details, but he expressed confidence that what is before the committee are a series of false accusations. So now we know where Trump and Matt Gaetz stand. They're saying, nope, not true. These aren't the droids you're looking for. This is all just misinformation. This is fake news. So what's the House saying? The House is like, well, let's see the report. I don't know if you mentioned this in the setup, but there has been an ongoing ethics report in the House for over 3 years. And
Right.
so they were going to release it the last Friday. And the announcement was made on Wednesday, right? I think if the timing is right.
Johnson put that. Yeah.
Yeah. So part of that, suspend your disbelief, like these, nothing to say here. Mike Johnson's position is, well, because he's no longer in the House, he stepped down. This is moot. This report is moot. No one needs to see it. Doesn't matter that it exists. But so not only are Democrats saying, well, that we're going to do what we can not to let that stand. They're also kind of reinforcing or buttressing what's being said in the Senate, which is, hey, we're the senators. We're supposed to advise and consent. If we're going to vote on this, we want that report. So basically trying to say you might not release it publicly, but we have a mechanism in place where we can see things that don't get released publicly, and
Right.
we deserve to see that. So I think that's where we are today. And then
Yeah.
lastly, before I hand over to you, because I'm curious what you think about this. because this is something I wasn't 100% sure about. I saw the headline, but we have to investigate, you and I, so we know better. There's such a thing as a privileged resolution, which forces a vote to the full House. And the Democrats have indicated that that's what they're going to do. They're going to apply a fast track procedure. Once they apply for a privileged resolution, the Johnson's going to have 2 days to respond, to release the report, or to have the full House vote on the releasing of the report. As of right now, it's tied 5-5 in committee, and that means it's not being released. 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, stalemate. The public isn't getting to see this. So it's interesting to know that that's what's in place, that the Democrats are saying this has happened before, we could do this again.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is one where the Democrats really don't have a downside in terms of their politics. There are even some Democratic Party strategists who are suggesting that Democrats vote for him. That when the Republicans try to vote him down, they vote him in because, first of all, he's going to be extremely ineffective, and secondly, this is going to dog him. I mean, the others, the strategists are always saying it might even be better that the report doesn't get released until a later date, because sooner or later it's going to get leaked, and the witnesses are already on television or in interviews, not on television yet, talking about what they testified to. They weren't sworn to secrecy. You know, this isn't. They're not bound by any congressional rules of ethics. So, careful what you ask for. I don't think Democrats are going to vote for him. Nobody wants to go on record as doing that, but it's just an interesting point that they're like, they would rather have that, some of them, than have somebody who is effective in basically getting from Trump what he wants, and getting Trump what he wants. So it's kind of interesting as to what do the Democrats want out of it. They know this is going to be a bat guano crazy administration. What difference does it make if it's Gates or somebody else? That's he'll be the Ashcroft or the Mitchell. I mean, the Republicans have a real history of bad choices for attorney generals. Even Reagan had Edwin Meese. Now, there are Democrats who are really disappointed with Merrick Garland, but that's because they see him as weak and passive. And the reason that Trump is in here, because he delayed everything so long that nothing could get to trial on time, and in an effort to not look partisan. Another one of those issues where, as Carville said, the Republicans treat politics as trench warfare, and the Democrats treat it as a debating society. And once again, this is played out. Well, there are Democrats that are basically saying, let them in. We know what we're dealing with, and there's not really going to be any good that's going to come out of it because, and don't leak everything right away. Let the story just continue to develop over the next 2, 3, 4 years if necessary. So I think once again there are Republicans who privately hate Trump's guts, would just wish he would go away, and this is one of the reasons. He's right out of the gate. He's got these problems. Now, I personally have bigger problems with like the choice of Huckabee, the Fox News guy, as defense secretary, and the rest, because those are real. Those are things that will make a difference. Matt Gaetz, if he leaves it alone, the Department of Justice can operate under him without him doing anything. But then again, there's probably going to be a lot of people quitting the Department of Justice because of this. That's kind of that is also seen as possibly what Trump's strategy was. Rather than having to fire them all, if he can get them to all resign right away, then that takes care of the problem, and he doesn't even look like a bad guy. Well, we'll see what they actually do. It's just, again, when I saw that, I thought that it had to be satire, because what do you do? What is Saturday Night Live going to do with any of this? What is Colbert and everybody else going to do with it? It boggles the mind.
Yeah, so you opened up a couple interesting lanes here we could go down. I would say, firstly, I agree with you 100% that like one of Trump's superpowers is that he's not just so effective at targeting the outrage, but in this instance, he's flooding the zone with outrage. So he's proven that he is able to get under everybody's skin. And we're still 2 months out before any of this is even going to be in play, right? So that there's that. If there's so many things that are absurd and outrageous, where are the serious concerns, right? And I agree with you that just as one example, Pete Hegseth for defense secretary, like that's to me that's going to be like the thing that everybody really, when you start to see what he represents and what that means to national security, like that's a big one. Matt Gaetz, like this is a little bit of a lesser problem, but it's still a problem, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is I mean, not to make light of it, but you said, well, what are the comedians going to do? Because this is already so absurd. The Daily Show, I hate to keep mentioning them, but when they've been on point lately, I hadn't heard this before, but basically Matt Gaetz flew these two young women allegedly up to New York City to watch him appear on Fox News and to watch the musical Pretty Woman, which is about a prostitute. And then I think the dollar amounts were in the $10,000 or something they were paid. But again, this is all allegedly. Who knows how true it is? But the point is that it's actually even more absurd that they took them up to see a play about a prostitute, right? So that's just madness. But more to the concrete and things that matter here. It is like, well, I don't think that the Senate actually, let's say it a different way. Matt Gaetz has enemies within his own party in both chambers. He was, his crew was responsible for having Kevin McCarthy, unseated as Speaker of the House. So the majority of his colleagues in the House despised him, allegedly. This is what's been reported. But his team, his clique within the House has said that they're going to, like, basically, I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene who said, hey, not everybody's perfect, and we're gonna, if you guys don't approve him, then we spill the beans on everybody, because the ethics complaints against him included things like just I mean, not to make light of it, but he showed videos of some of these exploits with colleagues on the floor, like, that didn't want to see it. He bragged about drugs and sex and these other things, and colleagues thought that those were ethics violations in and of themselves, just kind of being a walking troll, but not just in terms of taste, but also in terms of commitment to undermining the established power. If you've seen him testify, he comes across as being highly intelligent and an effective troll. He's a highly effective troll.
Right.
So I think he's got enemies in both chambers. Does Trump think he's the best attorney general? No. But Trump, I'm sure that Trump put him forward as, let's just see what kind of it's table flipping personified, basically.
Yeah, but the one thing that the Republicans in the Senate and the House have to worry about is we're almost to the end here, but in 2 years there's going to be another election in which low propensity voters don't vote in. And this is not something you want to dog in a real election, one where people don't come out of the woodwork to vote that aren't paying attention to politics. And I will have to talk about that another time. But this is not what senators and House people in very close races want to be having to deal with, and to have to account for their votes one way or another. We'll see. saying that we're going to discuss a little bit of the policy impacts of the election, and of course, we're talking about the impact on climate change. We are talking about a president who was elected on the basis that climate change is a hoax. Although there is some concern. J.D. Vance, for instance, refused to answer whether he believed it was a hoax. He was very evasive on that matter. So does Trump really believe that, or did he just play to people who are part of his constituency that believe that? And will he actually, as promised, reverse everything in the Inflation Reduction Act? Well, I've been reading up on some studies on that, and Biden has, in anticipation of the possibility of losing the election, this is money that's supposed to be spread out over, the next, I forget how many years, but investments have been made, and some of them in red state districts, and red states. And if he was to cold turkey cut this off somehow, which, by the way, he doesn't have the power to do that without congressional acts, but would he do it anyway? I mean, we don't know. The system of checks and balances are going to be challenged, but it would cost hundreds of thousands of jobs directly, possibly millions indirectly, would reduce our exports by like a huge amount, and we would have to be paying on imports because the technologies that we're talking about are happening. The transition to electric vehicles is happening. The transition to renewable energy is happening. It's now a second after oil in terms of its size. It's surpassed coal in terms of the energy it produces. Will Trump cancel the leases or cancel or just refuse the applications? Will he kill, for instance, the wind project that is going to be local here and down by Morris Bay? Will he do that? Well, he will earn the ire of people like Rex Spohn, right, who support this, who want jobs here. And granted, they're going to use that it's going to cost billions, not just for the farm itself, but for the capacity to transfer it to elsewhere to the grid. But this is something that potentially could power 21 million homes in California and possibly generate 6% of the current generating capacity. And it's the initial investment. After that, it's practically free. So it's something that he's got to really think about. If he cancels that, if he cancels he could probably get away with canceling the tax breaks for EVs because the people who are buying the EVs aren't the people he has to worry about. But the infrastructure, the money that chambers of commerce all over the country are pushing for this, is he willing to basically take a chunk out of the economy to do this? And there would be severe economic consequences in terms of losses of existing jobs right now.
I mean, this is obviously something that we're going to see play out because we're at a transformative period in history where there is general consensus that investments need to be made. Where the consensus kind of falls off is, can we fully transition from where we are to where we want to be in the timeline? That's basically the common wisdom, conventional wisdom out there, is that with enough money we could fast track this transition. And so I think that former Representative Lee Zeldin has proven that he's on the side of we policy leaders, politicians, are going to move the benchmark, like in effect say, despite what you hear and think and believe about climate change, we're not going to stifle traditional legacy fossil fuel industry because of the reasons that they're going to lay out. So I think part of this is just cultural shock in the face kind of standard Republican position. Like when you hear Trump say over and over again that the economy was terrible. Economy is not terrible. When you talk about energy having their hands tied behind their back, their hands are not tied behind their back. They're making record profits. United States is producing the most energy of any country in the world. So it was a lot of that was, like I've said on this before with you, team building election exercises to
Right.
say one thing, to rally the troops so that they could put in place the policies that benefit their benefactors, basically the traditional energy industry. So that's big picture, but let's drill down a little bit. This guy, Representative Zeldin, he could undo climate progress. He can undo health protections. And what, how might that play out besides just removal from the U.S. Of the U.S. from the Paris Climate Treaty? One of the things that they're talking about doing is actually like moving the EPA out of Washington. So EPA has offices all over the country that are involved in specific projects like cleaning up legacy pollution sites, Superfund sites they're called, from the Industrial Revolution that have really just cost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to clean up over many decades. So the EPA is going to exist. The question is, what's its leadership going to look like? And so by saying, hey, we're just going to shut down the Washington office, it's a way of saying this is not a priority. It's part of climate denialism in a way that people understand. So it's a lot of rhetoric. People have said it's rhetoric and behavior. That is, the quote is very critical and hostile to all EPA regulatory power. That's Barry Rabe,
Right.
professor of environmental and public policy in Michigan. That's him speaking to a German newspaper because the Deutsche Welle was like, "What's happening here?" And this guy's like, "Look, it's about changing the EPA's power. That's really what we're talking about." And so the EPA gets to interpret rules, right? Like the administrative part of the executive branch takes laws that Congress makes and interprets them and enacts them and enforces them and spends the money, signs the contracts, checks the projects. So the law might be the law. But so for example, like, right now, electric vehicle subsidies. Well, Elon Musk, who's on board with this administration, his organization, Tesla, makes electric cars, but they've already sold so many electric cars that people that buy Teslas don't get the tax credit. So you could picture Elon Musk could say, well, it's an uneconomic proposition to incentivize buying electric cars. And
I think Musk is going to phase out, move away from Tesla, probably sell his interests in it because people are not buying the cars because of his association. The people, his economic constituency there are liberal people who now don't want anything to do with them. So there's plenty of other competing electric cars. It may be the best electric car out there, but they're not buying them. There's been a decline in the sales. So he may just figure, I'm pulling out of it.
So I'm not gonna go too deep in the auto industry, other than to say the Tesla Model Y is the #1 selling vehicle in California.
Yeah, it is.
And so,
but it used to be 90%, and I think it's down to about between 60 and 70% at this time.
Yeah, and that's because the market's expanding, because a lot of companies have great electric car products better than his. So maybe I'm not sure how that's all going to play out, but the truth is that there are a lot of things that can be broken by ill will from Zeldin, right? And that, I think Trump would be kind of rewarding his base, his benefactors, by having somebody who is antagonistic to green writ large, climate writ large. But here's one thing I think is really important too. Like, I think you said this in your intro, that money, like Biden administration has put in place huge investments in rural America, red states, Republican districts. And it's really hard to take that money back, it's really hard to reject that money that's being spent in your community. So, for example, building electric vehicle stations, that doesn't hurt anybody. It brings in visitors.
Let me just give you a couple of numbers and see what you say about it. But Forbes magazine says that basically the act kickstarted an American manufacturing renaissance, attracting more than $500 billion in new private investment between August 2022 and August 2024. More than half of total nationwide private investment growth over that time, and creating more than 334,000 direct jobs, not the Keynesian effect jobs, but direct jobs there. And the congressional districts, and I'm wondering if the Biden administration Democrats did this directly, but congressional districts represented by Republicans have secured 80% of those investments. And they're urging, please, don't do that, because they don't vote for this. It won't take many. It looks like it's going to be the House is going to be broken down to the best shot of Democrats is 215, but they've got 213 now. It looks like they've flipped a seat in Southern California, Derek Tron, possibly the 13th as well. So it won't take many people, Republicans, saying, "Oh man, I'm not going down with the ship," to do this. This is the Johns Hopkins University said that basically, if they repealed the IRA and canceled that fund, it would hand $66 billion in new investment opportunities to other countries and directly compete economically with the U.S. while costing America up to $50 billion in lost exports. He's not going to shut this thing down. He would be crazy to do that. Will he try to tweak it so that red states benefit from it? Well, they already benefit 80%. That's how it was set up. So there's really not a whole lot he can do. I think what he'll do is he'll cancel some things and make a big deal out of that. Just like I think he's probably not going to deport millions of people. He'll probably deport a lot of people and lie about how many people he's deported, right? So yeah, I have hope that enough of it will survive until another presidency and another day for Democrats comes back. It's not going to be decimated. And this is really important because there was an analysis, I couldn't find the article again, I read it last night, that we may be reaching the peak of emissions within the next few years. In other words, because of the changes that we've already made to it and our use of energy and cars and the rest, we may actually reach the peak. Now, unfortunately, that's not going to stop the climate change or warming. There's going to be a big lag of that. But we peak, but in greenhouse emissions may actually be decreasing within the next few years. Will Trump reverse that? I don't know, but there's only so much he can do. We're already pumping a record amount of gas. I don't think Trump can pump a whole lot more. Biden actually did this because he wanted it, and it was part of a strategy of transition. Let's not cause gas prices for people while we're converting to electric vehicles. So anyway, a lot to be said there. I'm going to let you respond to some of that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the context and the data because I was just going on, I've looked at so many different things. I didn't have exact numbers in front of me. It's absolutely amazing that you said, 500 billion in private stimulus on top of the many hundreds of billions of government money. Like you said, it's not direct. That's not Keynesian stimulus. That's actually growing the industries of the future, which is exactly what it was intended to do. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. The point is that people are going to benefit from these investments. The corollary to this, not to keep pointing to Elon Musk, but I've seen him speak several times about this, and he just speculates, projects that it's going to be an all of the above energy future for a while. That the faster we can have green energy, the better. Like he believes in all of the things, and that also theoretically, because of how just the way energy works, we need energy that can be produced at night when there's not solar. We need peak time energy, which leads to potentially nuclear. There's third and fourth generation nuclear technologies out there that we're going to be exploring. Some people are saying that's not green because of the radioactive waste, but other people are saying, well, it's not carbon, so it's climate positive. So I think that's a debate that we're going to explore more in the future too. But beyond just that, I think that there's like really what's at play in many of the complaints about the EPA and about the regulatory state is, 2 out of 3 jobs in this country are small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of small businesses owners, they don't have huge staffs of lawyers and environmental specialists. They try to make investments in their businesses and they say, oh, I've got this red tape, I've got that red tape. So in terms of like rewarding the base, just to say, we're going to streamline your permitting process for you to do the have an environmental impact statement. That is actually one of the big ways that Trump gets a win rhetorically,
Yeah.
just by saying we're going to make it easier to do business. We're going to be smart about it. Now, granted, that just means cutting regulation typically, and that's not necessarily good for water or air or communities. But
Right.
this is just, I think this is the types of things that we could expect to see. And let me just kind of take these two Venn diagrams and where they overlap. A lot of these investments that the federal government makes is actually in cleaning up orphan oil wells and gas wells that are like toxic pollution sites.
Yeah.
So much of the legacy of the Industrial Revolution over the last, again, 170 years has been to leave a wrath of pollution. And so there's pockets of cancer clusters. So there's this concept that has evolved called environmental justice, which is, hey, companies are trying to get permits so that they can pollute, and the EPA is saying, hey, you can't pollute here because you've potentially, allegedly caused massive harms in the past, and we want to curtail those types of harms of being reinitiated in new projects. So this is where the rubber hits the road, is accountability and actually paying for the harms. It's called externalities. If nobody has to pay for the harm of industry, then industry gets more profit. So I think that this is kind of happening outside of the range of things that we typically talk about. But that's really, I think, what Trump and his supporters are. That's very much what they're focused on, is more profit at the expense of governmental intervention in decision making.
Eeny, meeny, chili beanie, the spirits are about to speak.
Are they friendly spirits?
Friendly? Just listen.
Well, this brings us to our predictions. Dave, what do you have for us?
So this week I saw in Politico that this is a quote: President-elect Donald Trump wasn't kidding when he said he'd let Robert F. Kennedy Jr. go wild on healthcare. And that article talks about how there's a short list of controversial people that Kennedy, his allies, they're called public health contrarians. They may take leadership roles in Food and Drug Administration, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and other key elements of what they're calling the nation's sprawling health department. So RFK Jr., he's got an organization called Make America Healthy Again. And so a name came up in this conversation. His name is Jay Bhattacharya. He's a Stanford University physician and economist. He's a critic of the NIH. So that is the National Institutes of Health. And the reason I think Trump is considering putting him forward is because during COVID lockdowns, he co-authored a piece called The Great Barrington Declaration that got hundreds of thousands of signatures from healthcare experts who said that that a lot of harm was being done by the decisions that were made during COVID. And turns out that one of the predictions they made was that measures being considered would fall disproportionately on poor people and children. Many people think that actually was predictive in hindsight. In fact, Francis Collins, who was the head of the NIH at the time, said that these were fringe experts and really thought this is misinformation, disinformation, needs to be taken down. And so censorship occurred. There was a Supreme Court case. And so really, this is high profile for Republicans and for conservatives, that this person is an expert who was a contrarian during a time when people needed contrarians. And so now my prediction is that Jay Bhattacharya will, in fact, become the next director of the National Institutes of Health.
All right, I'll be real quick. The Democrats are forcing through a number of judges. So far Biden has appointed 217, and there are now 26 more judicial nominees that are being pushed through. The Republican leadership, particularly Senator Thune, are really frustrated that Republicans were missing from the votes earlier this week to go watch the X space launch and all these types of things. Vance did come back to try to slow things down, but the Democrats were able to advance the people through committee and it looks like it's going to go to the floor. My prediction is at this point, I think the 26 are going to be appointed, no matter what the Republicans try to do now. It's really too late to slow them down. Once they're out of committee, they can slow it down, and they'll be up until 2 a.m. and the rest. But by the time it's done, Biden will have filled 243 judges. 22 of these judges are district court, and 4 of them are circuit appellate court. And for the Republicans to complain about this is ridiculous, because Trump and the Republicans did the exact same thing in 2020 and jammed through 13 nominees, and of course also jammed through Amy Coney Barrett even before lame duck sections. Both parties do it, so for them to be whining about it, well, it's also typical to whine about it. But anyway, we'll see if any of this comes true. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.